Got it.
Fabulous. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you're listening to us from today. Myself, Julie Ford of Gothard Row More Than Mediation. I'm here with the fantastic David Votta, who I let him introduce himself.
Lovely. Well, what an introduction. Thank you, Julie. Hi, everyone. David Votta here. I am the owner of Votta Sales and Lettings, an estate and letting agency based in the southeast of Kent, and I am also the Arla Property Mark President.
Now that is a title and a half.
Unless you're watching it in a year's time, then I'll be a past president. So if you're watching it now, yeah.
So today we're going to be discussing the Renters Reform White Paper and what it means to us and what it means to landlords. We're not going to be looking at it from a legal perspective. We are going to be looking at it from a coalface perspective. So what we understand it to be, all the pitfalls that we can see, and hopefully maybe by the end of this recording, we would have put everything to rights and the government will just go with what we say, because that will just make life easier. So which particular topic would you like to start on today, David?
Do you know what? There's so many, Julie. I was reading through and I think, should we start with perhaps the periodic tenancies section about the month-to-month tenancies?
Yeah, sounds good.
So, I mean, I'm reading through this and I'm thinking, okay, again, this whole white paper has this persona of, making it fairer. And I think if things have got to be fair, they've got to be fair for everyone. So landlords as well as tenants. And we're looking at making standards better. And I'm looking through and I'm thinking there's a lot of regulations in place already, but not being enforced. Yet we're bringing in the Renters Reform Bill, which is another regulation, to then not be enforced again. I mean, this is what I'm thinking. I'm not being cynical. I'm just looking at the facts. And this periodic tenancy where you imagine a tenant, you say, look, Julie, just to let you know, you're not going to have a fixed term, you're going to have a month-to-month tenancy. Although they're saying you can't serve notice within the first 6 months. But I don't know, if you imagine Mr. and Mrs. Smith move into a rented property and, they sign up for a month and then in month 2, they decide they don't want to be together and they separate and then they go their separate ways. And then the landlord's got to suffer the cost. So you have to do the checkout again. You have got to, do any wear and tear that's been caused within the month, moving boxes in, moving furniture out. And, the landlord's got to then pay remarketing costs, which again eats into the void. So say they pay an agent or something £650 to market the property, that comes off the first month's rent, the tenant moves in, they're only in there a month, and then the agent has to remarket again. Does the agent have to discount that setup fee so the landlord doesn't have to stump up the cost? But then again, from an agent's perspective, we still have to go on Rightmove, Zoopla, on the market, all the portals, all the viewings, petrol in the car to do the viewings, draw up the agreement, get everyone referenced. There's a whole array of costs that come about, but I don't know that the government have factored that in. And also, if you're looking at tenancy renewals, you would never renew a tenancy ever again. It would just be the same tenancy perpetually going on until that tenancy is in breach. And you look at, I hate the word no fault eviction, Julie, because I don't know if I've ever met a landlord that's ever evicted a bad tenant for no reason, or a good tenant for no reason. Why would you get rid of a good tenant for no reason? You wouldn't. And I just think, again, it's just a white paper. So anybody watching this doesn't have to be scared and think, because a lot of landlords are saying, I'm going to sell up, but don't, because I see this, Julie, as an opportunity to get the ear of government and go, right, we got a real reform, because we can talk about the mandatory grounds being slightly changed as well. So there's a massive bit of work to do, and we're going to have loads of round table discussions. I need evidence from landlords, I need evidence from letting agents, because I think we could make this more beneficial for our landlords, and it will be.
I agree. No, absolutely. I agree with absolutely everything you've said. I mean, from my perspective, I'm looking at the balance here. I mean, at the moment, they're talking about making renting more secure. I don't see how taking away a fixed term that gives someone the knowledge, right, I've got this property for a year, I've got it for 12 months, there's nothing the landlord can do unless I mess up. I've got it for a year. They're taking that away. To me, that sounds like they're taking the security away, and they're taking it away for both parties. The landlords don't know if the tenants are going to move in on a Monday and up and leave on the Wednesday. Where's that going to leave everybody? And then just giving notice, does that mean the tenant has actually given up the tenancy? Will we have to have signed deeds of surrender? Will the landlord still have to go through the accelerated possession or whatever we're going to have procedure in place now to get the possession back? Will that mean more court fees? There's all too many unanswered questions, and I don't think this gives security to tenants at all.
No.
I think if you know that you've got a periodic, and if you and your landlord just don't get on, and after 6 months you're serving you notice, I don't see how that brings security to anybody, to be honest. I think it removes it. I think we're taking a step backwards with that.
Yeah, exactly. And they're saying that a landlord can't evict without a good reason. So it's a funny one, because they're going to have to rewrite the Housing Act. They're going to have to look at Section 8, as we know, review the grounds. They've already set a proposal on making ground 11 a mandatory ground. So if a tenant is persistently late with their rent, it might not be the 2 months, because as you know, historically, in order to serve a Section 8, ground 8, 10 and 11, you need to have that mandatory ground of ground 8 to get possession in court, and the 2 discretionary grounds are discretionary. So you imagine like a landlord serves a Section 8 notice on a tenant who's 2 months in arrears, and then it gets to the court day before court day, the tenant pays off £100. So they're no longer 2 months in arrears. So the judge gets his bit of paper out and goes, well, that doesn't check out, and we won't award it on a Section 8. So they've sorted that out, because they've proposed that Section ground 11 will then become mandatory, which is good. But it's just bizarre, Julie, because I spoke to a lot of people and they said, well, in Scotland, they introduced the PRT, the private rented tenancy. They removed Section 21, which they called Section 33. And they haven't seen many people move in for a month and then move straight back out. Certain people have, certain haven't. But what I like to do, Julie, is do this on an individual landlord basis. So if you're the landlord, Julie, forget the fact that you're a managing agent and you look after loads of properties. Let's look at Julie, the landlord. So she moves. If you're looking at your return and you've already lost about £1,000 over the year, and you're only in February in setup costs, that's just eating into your return. Because let's face it, it is a business and it is income, although you're providing a commodity in housing for somebody to live. And I just, like we said earlier, it's about thinking it through and having that ability, because in the reform paper it says, and I think I can quote it, if a tenant would like to leave the tenancy, they are free to do so. Okay, how's that fair? How is that levelling up,
But my concern with this as well, and again, it's, the knock-on effects of bringing these legislations to the fore. And again, like you've said, this is a white paper, this is an idea on the back of an envelope, it is not the law yet.
Yes.
But if a tenant can leave at any point as soon as they've moved in, there's no stipulation, they don't have to be there for 6 months before they can serve notice. How is this stopping with the holiday let stuff that's starting to fester around? How is this stopping the private rented sector becoming a cheaper Airbnb option? Move in, pay 500 quid for your room for a month, move out. Airbnb, done, cheaper.
Furnished,
I'm just seeing it creating more problems than it's actually solving.
Yeah, and also another cheeky way, you imagine a parent wants to get their kid into a certain school, let's sign a tenancy for a month and then end the tenancy. We've got the school.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
I know, funny, it opens a can of worms, this legislation, it really does.
Oh, they haven't thought this one through, have they?
No, there's no accountability on that at all. I can see why a parent would do it, but you imagine that. How's that fair? How is that levelling up? Because when reading that white paper, there's that theme of improving standards, as we said throughout. And I think my perception, if they're going to do the periodic tenancy, and in order to make it work, if they can prove a ground under either the HHSRS or the Fitness for Human Habitation Bill, they need something they can go to say, actually, my property is in disrepair and it's a category 1 hazard, therefore I'm giving my notice and I'm going to go penalty free. Maybe I can understand that, because that would then enforce the landlord to improve their standard. But if you've got a great landlord, like many landlords are, Julie, that look after their properties, keep it to a great standard, but the tenant just wants to go, that's not fair on that landlord. You're basically conditioning that good landlord with all the bad landlords in the country, which are few and far between. You only hear it in the press because they make news. You never hear about that landlord that said, do you know what, I'm going to discount your rent for 2 years because of COVID, and I'm not going to pursue you, you're going to pay your debt off and I'm going to work with you. You don't really hear about those great stories, but we do, because we're an agency and the work you do as well. But there's no news like bad news.
No, absolutely. That's what sells the newspapers, apparently. But going back to what you were what you were talking about, the disrepair level there.
Yeah,
Reading the report, it did say that there were 1.6 million properties in the private rented sector that fell below what they classed as a decent home standard. This is where, for me, it all gets a little bit, we're not actually addressing the problem.
yeah,
So if they know there's 1.6 million properties that fall below, then they know where those properties are. They
yeah.
know of them. They haven't made this up. They know of them. Why are we spending all this money targeting landlords that have got the 3.8 that are fine, million properties that are in good condition? Why are we not targeting the 1.6 that we know about and
Yeah.
ploughing money and resources into the enforcement that we've already got? I mean, the private rented sector is hugely regulated, but under enforced. And I think that's the
Mm.
problem. We don't need regulation. We've got hundreds of the stuff. We've
We
got
need it.
168 laws and 402 regulations. We need no more. We don't.
Yeah,
We've got enough, but we just need someone to go out there and enforce it. And
yeah,
I think keep putting it on the local councils all the time is just passing the buck, because the local councils have their funding removed from the government. The government then expect them to go out and do these additional jobs. How? With who?
mm.
Volunteer staff? I mean, how is it going to work realistically? I think they should have just been looking at targeting that 1.6 million of bad properties, or however they classed them. And I think that in itself would bring the standard up, because most landlords out there take pride in their rental property and want to provide a good level of accommodation for people. So I don't understand how we're hitting these good landlords again and again and again, just to try and get the bad apple in the barrel, who's always going to sink to the bottom of the barrel and never really be affected by it anyway.
Yeah. Do you know what? I can't answer that, because you're absolutely right. It's the $1 million question, isn't it? Because you imagine, when did they bring in the HHSRS? 2004, wasn't it? 2004.
Yeah.
There's 29 category hazards there. I mean, people say it's overly complicated. Is it damp, mold, light, heating, excessive cold? It's quite clear, but who's enforcing these standards? And I've seen a situation where a landlord got an improvement order and he got 28 days to comply with it. A year and a half later, nothing's happened because they're under-resourced. Oh, I'm sorry, that person's no longer with the authority. And, I'm not speaking out of turn. It is resources. If they had the money to resource, or just throw at enforcement, that's all they need to do. Because I had this conversation, we're going back to the periodic tenancy subject. I know we're deviating a little bit, but back in, say, 2012, when I was managing a branch, we would have, say, about 30 available properties in our little area of Ramsgate. And if a tenant got Section 21 notice then because the landlord wanted to sell, move back in, or the tenant was a problem, the tenant would go, oh, well, I guess I'll go and find somewhere else. And they've got choice. They've got choice of properties. There's 30 with us, there's 60 with a competing great big firm, there's 4. And, in the high street, there's a lot of agents. And there was that choice. There was no worry about Section 21. There's no worry about homelessness because there was so much availability. We would let to a lot of tenants on benefits all the time. Not so much, I mean, we do as an agency now, we can't discriminate, but not so much now, because the landlord has now almost got the pick of the bunch. And I hate to use that phrase, but they do. And they the way housing benefit and universal credit is paid, it's often paid in arrears. It's no good for the landlord's mortgage. And they've created a problem, and now they're going to try and solve the problem by creating another problem, which is going to deter a lot of landlords. And I say to a lot of landlords, continue, stay cool. I emailed all my landlords about this. I said, well, David, you've clearly got it covered. We trust you. We're going to stick with it. I don't want to sell. A lot of self-managing landlords I spoke to said, oh, I'm going to sell. I can't do it, because it's getting the compliance right. And so, yeah, it's an interesting one. That's just periodic tenancies. There's loads of points.
Oh, I know, absolutely. But just sticking with the periodic tenancies for a moment before we move on to our next topic. There doesn't seem to be anything in this white paper that supports the student market. Now, surely from a periodic point of view, that's detrimental to both the landlord and the tenant again for the student market.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't really deal in the student side, but I've spoke to a couple of people that are like, crikey, so you've missed your window for your student there, haven't you? So if the tenant moves in and then moves straight out because, I don't know, it's not gone well at the campus stuff or whatever it is, then, yeah, that's not going to work, is it?
And also from a perspective of both a landlord and a letting agent, a lot of these students are put onto joint ASTs. They're personally something I don't think that should happen. They should all be on their own, but that's just a personal opinion.
Yeah.
What happens if one of those tenants want to leave? If it's a periodic, the rules as it stands now, if they don't change them, if it's a periodic and one joint tenant wants to leave, they end it for the entire joint tenancy. If that stays in place, that could create huge problems for the remaining tenants if their tenancy is going to end just because one person wants to leave.
Well, that's it. That's their studies over, isn't it? Job done. That's taking choice and a decision away from somebody again. And this is what worries me about this renters reform bill, is taking away choices, isn't it? I think, if it's, landlords and tenants both like the security of tenure, don't they? They like longer fixed term tenancies. It wasn't so long ago where they were going to mandate 5-year tenancies. Do you remember that proposal?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And now we're almost U-turning. We're almost going back. It's like going back to assured tenancies, isn't it, Julie? Where, a tenant's got to be really in breach to get possession. I mean, I don't know. It's like going full circle to try and revisit something that doesn't work. The one good thing is that they're not going to do, cap rents. They're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Rent control, yeah.
Yeah, but again, what you were saying there about the proposal for 5-year tenancies, there seems to be a lot of looking at how Europe does stuff and then seeing, can we do it? The difference with Europe is, yes, they do have longer tenancies. They have 3 or 5 years. Landlord has more responsibility in regards to redecorating. They must do that every 5 years. I know that's how it is in France. But also they've got 2 different sets of legislation when it comes to furnished and unfurnished. So again, it's much simpler process. If you're furnished, these are the rules. If you're unfurnished, these are the rules. That's it. I think what the government's trying to do over here is have that format, but forget that we've got 168 laws that need to somehow tie into this.
Yeah.
If they could just have a day where they took all those laws and put them in the shredder and just started again with just the one act, my life would be so much easier.
Yeah, it would be. Then we wouldn't be able to spout all the different bits of legislation we know and look really
we wouldn't be able to look clever then, would we?
Exactly.
But interestingly, with the build to rent market, they have adopted those longer tenancy periods. I've seen quite a few of them have actually said that 3 and 5 years are the standard tenancy that they offer. If you want something shorter, you've got to request that in writing. And they don't seem to be short of tenants signing up for the longer security. So does that not reflect what society wants? They want that longer security.
Yeah. And it is about choice, isn't it? I mean, a lot of tenants, some properties you find on your books are a bit more transient than others because they're 1-bedroom flats in the heart of town. They're almost stopgaps for people. They do 12 months, 18 months, move on. Others, you're going to have like your family homes where, I took over management of one that I let when I first started out my career, and he's been there years and years, like 15 years. He don't want to go anywhere. I think his exact words were, "They can carry me out in a box." It's great. Well,
absolutely. But the average tenancy length is 4.5 years, I think, isn't it? The last national statistics that were done. I mean, I'm a tenant myself as well as being a landlord, and the last property that I was in, I was there for 12.5 years. So it just goes to show, once people are in an area for whether it's business, family, or whatever, they want to stay. They want that community. I think COVID really showed people that we lost a lot of the old community spirit and how that made people feel. And I think maybe a lot of people were trying to find that in social media, and now actually realize that being around people, you can just knock on the door and go in and have a cup of tea or say morning to Joan down the road. It brings something to your life. And I think that's probably what the government's not really getting, that community is a big part for both landlords and tenants.
Yeah, and I think whilst with the periodic tenancy side of things, it's just job relocations and stuff like that. And I think there's provisions you could build in. Like, say, for example, someone gets relocated for a job and they have to move out. I think maybe the employer should cover the cost of the setup fees for the landlord. There's got to be a fair and balanced perspective. But then you look at a landlord, right? So you're telling a landlord, right, you can't take a higher deposit on pets. You could do a pet insurance policy, but the tenant could cancel that after 14 days at the start of their tenancy. So how do we enforce that without seeing the regular renewal policy from the tenants? Should we mandate that? You know, the landlord might say, I want a tenancy that's a bit more sustainable. So I've got 20 applications here. No, I don't want them because I think they might split up and move out. Don't want them because, you know, he might move a partner in, or I'm going to go with the most solid people, you know, the one that have been together. I want to know background checks. So I want to know how long they've been married. You know, you actually get some landlords that say, I had one landlord once that said, I will only accept tenants that are married and been married for a few years.
Wow.
And it sounds bizarre, but that's what is being created for them. They're now being led down a path of no choice, which means actually I'm going to go with not discriminating or anything. I'm going to go with the most sustainable tenant there is. And if you're a tenant and you're looking and you're not the most sustainable out of the 400 that are required on that property, then you don't stand a hope in hell. So the very legislation, the Renters Reform Bill that's being in to protect renters, is going to, you know, ruin it for renters in the long run. I'm trying not to swear, Julie. It's quite
You're live on Channel 4. Please do not swear. I mean, that takes us perfectly into the next topic, which is the pet situation. Yeah. Now, I have a pet myself. My landlord was aware of the pet before I moved in. There were no issues. Before I moved into this property, my landlord, it was his home and he lived here with his dog. So when I came with my cat, there wasn't too much of an issue. That was fine. Yeah. I was lucky because there are certainly enough landlords out there that wouldn't accept pets, full stop. And I think this new idea in the white paper that you can't unreasonably refuse. Well, surely landlords already have that. I don't see a lot in this white paper that's changing what we already have. No, the only thing that concerns me is the proposed change to the tenant fee ban, allowing the prohibited fee of an insurance to be a fee. But looking at it, and I've done quite a lot of research into this with all the insurance companies, there is none that actually have a tenant policy. They're all landlord policies. So does it mean that the landlord's got to purchase the policy and then pass that cost on to the tenant? But none of the policies that these insurance companies offer are for the tenant to take out to protect their pet.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So where does that go?
Not very far.
Exactly. I mean, okay, you've got the security as a landlord if you're taking out the insurance policy that you are keeping up the repayments. You know that tenant's not going to stop making the premiums, and therefore halfway through the tenancy, the policy is cancelled. But also, where's the ownership then? Because if it's the landlord's policy, but it's the tenant's pet, how does the insurance policy pay out for what's needed? Because the insurance policies that I've looked at, they cover pet damage, but only up to a certain amount. Only if it's the pet that was the pet that moved in, not if there's been a change of pet, if there's been an additional pet. I mean, there's so much like red tape just for this one piece of protection. Again, it's another industry that's involved in making the decision for the private rented sector. And I'm just interested to understand, I know obviously neither of us are in insurance, but interested to understand from insurance companies how they're going to adapt or maybe make a new product should this come into force.
Yes, exactly. What do? Do you have a change of share but for pets? You know, my dog's pregnant, it's going to have puppies. Okay, all right, that's interesting. Does that breach the agreement, or is that still insurable? Do you have to take out additional cover? You're right. Like we said before, they put these ideas out, but it comes up an array of stuff. And the trouble is, and I don't mean it's any disrespectful to government ministers and all that, but they're not on the front line. They're not doing the job day in, day out. They don't understand what we know and what we're doing and what we're seeing and what we're hearing. It's a case of, this is what we'd like to do. We're going to do it. Absolutely.
But it is, again, it's so many different industries are affected by the decisions made for the private rented sector. You've got the mortgage. We were talking earlier about the 50-year mortgage that's being proposed. Now, is that just for first-time buyers? Can landlords have that? If a landlord can get a 50-year mortgage and be able to pass that down to his children through his business, through his company, I mean, surely that's a good thing. But again, way too many questions. That's now the mortgage industry that's got to wade in and say, hang on, it's got to meet our criteria, otherwise our underwriters won't get involved. And what happens to life insurance on mortgages if you can transfer them to other people? You know, it's great having these ideas on the back of an envelope, and I think sometimes maybe one person had too many shots of whiskey before they had the idea, but you know, it's, you're not thinking how this is going. It's the holistic approach and the knock-on effect to all the other industries that are involved in the private rented sector. And keeping to put things on the local council, I think, is unfair. Local councils need to make money now because the government keep removing their funding. And the only way that the councils can make money is licensing schemes and targeting HMO landlords. They're actually genuinely not interested in single let landlords. They don't make the money out of them. So the single let landlords get unenforced, while the HMO landlords are battered day in, day out, because it's low-hanging fruit for the councils. I think that moves us on really to the rent side of things. And obviously in the white paper, we looked at the rent increases. Now, we know that they're not going to cap rent, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you. I'm a bit on the fence with that. Again, like I say, in Europe, they have rent caps in Europe. I mean, in France, in Paris, each arrondissement in Paris has its own rent cap. So you could live in one area of Paris and it's cheaper to live in the other area of Paris. But again, their legislation is very different, a lot more simple. So I think a lot of things would have to come into play before we had anything like that happening in the UK at all. But again, looking at what the white paper has said about rent increases, I don't see a lot of difference to what we have in place already, other than Section 13 proposed to be 2 months' notice instead of 1 month's notice. Again, I'm not seeing what's different. It's just like someone's just rewritten the sentence. They've just reframed it.
I thought that. I thought, have I missed something? Because that's exactly what happens now. You know, normally a landlord doesn't increase the rent more than once in a fixed term anyway. And when you're on a periodic tenancy, it's a Section 13 notice for just 1 month. So you've hit the nail on the head. There's no real difference there at all.
No, and I think reading through the white paper, the proposals that they're bringing, although the media love to scaremonger and apparently landlords could no longer evict and, you know, the world was going to end. And reading the white paper, I couldn't really see a lot of difference to what we already have in place, other than the periodic tenancies and the passport deposits. But I think that was right at the bottom, so I don't think they're that interested in that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, rent controls in this country didn't work back in the day, and they won't work again. It's not really great for the economy anyway. But my main worry is that, like you said, landlords will see the headline figures, 12 points, all of that, and run for the hills. But they don't need to, because it's still, you know, rents are at an all-time high. That's not a good thing for tenants, but it's a byproduct of government legislation. And I think we wouldn't have half the problems if there were the available stock. And this whole thing of everybody wants home ownership, it's not. A lot of people, you know, you're renting as a lifestyle choice, Julie, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can't be removing the choice. That's the main thing, isn't it, really?
I think it goes back to an antiquated mentality that you hadn't made it in society until you owned your own property.
Yeah.
You know, the Englishman's home was his castle and all this. And back in the day when that was a mentality, it worked because that was the era it was in. And you could see society was extremely different to how it is now. I mean, society has changed in the last couple of years, let alone, you know, over the last 50 years. And I think people do like the fact that they don't own. I mean, for me personally, it is a lifestyle choice. I like the fact that I can move around if I want to. Yes, I was in my last property for 12 years, but that's just how it worked. But also it's from a financial point of view. I'm paying rent and somebody else fixes everything. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. And I say it a lot, because even some landlords say, because, you know, we put stuff on and they've been big, like we just let a massive farmhouse for £2,500 a month, and the landlord's like, yeah, you know. And I said to him, look, this is going to take a while to let, because our niche market is like that. We let it in 48 hours.
Wow. Brilliant.
It's incredible, because it was a lifestyle choice from someone that's come down from out the area that kind of wants their own space. They need to come away because of a certain situation that they had to get away from. Genuinely lovely person, and moved in over the weekend, happy as Larry. And I'm looking at it thinking, £2,500, who has the money? But people do. And like you say, it's not like there isn't that demand for home ownership. It's a case of people can earn a hell of a lot of money and go from place to place. Like, I was in London last week, and it was Thursday night, you know, we call it Thirsty Thursday. And I was out in between conferences and stuff. And it was packed, you know, people saying about recession and all that. So the pubs there, people are spilling out onto the pavement. There's queues to get in the pubs. There's still people that earn the big bucks, you know, that want that lifestyle choice of being able to rent as well. The trouble is, it's unfortunate. There's a lot of people out there that are on lower incomes, and they now get, when it comes to renting a property, they're now pushed to the bottom of the pile because of government legislation, because of the lack of properties. And like I said before, if there was a lot more available properties, we wouldn't be putting these regulations in place. And they're looking at that snapshot of, oh, you know, loads of landlords are bad and they're this and that. No, it's a real minority. I mean, I can't remember the survey, Julie, but there's one that was done in, I think it was the NRLA, you know, Ben Beadle shared it, where, you know, I think it was 85 or even 90% of tenants were happy in their home.
Yeah.
It says it all. It really says it all. You know, we are the generation of.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, the government aren't looking at those statistics, are they? They're looking, and they're doing a little bit of a shelter, really, aren't they? And they're moving the statistics to feed what they need to feed it. Exactly, for their purpose. But I mean, I'm with you on this. Having read that white paper with me highlighter pens and me post-it notes at the ready, I don't see it's as dramatic as the media were making out, and a lot of the voices that were out there, the influential voices, I think made it sound a lot worse than it actually is. But like you say, we've got to remember, this is an idea on the back of an envelope at the moment. This is not in Parliament. It's not a bill. It's nowhere. There'll be consultation after consultation. It will be watered down. I don't know, at the end of it, we might get a change to the Tenant Fee Ban Act out of it. That maybe we get.
Exactly. Yeah, it'll be interesting because, like you say, it's got to go for that parliamentary passage. It's going to be a couple of years, but I mean, other than that, I don't know about you, Julie, unless you've got to cover up the bits. But I'm looking at it, thinking I'm not sure what else. I mean, I'm going through the bit about the ombudsman's quite good for landlords.
Yeah.
But I feel that if a landlord is a managed landlord under a managing agent, they want little or no responsibility. They want the agent to deal with it, which is good. So if you have an ombudsman for landlords, which they're saying every landlord has to be signed up to, even if you have got a managing agent, then do they have to sign up to the portal and do this and do that? Because you've got the agent, the landlord licensing in Wales. I think it's now in Scotland as well, which I think is a good thing. But what we don't want to do is give landlords more work to do, even with a managed service, because the idea of coming with an agent, if you're not self-managing, is that you don't have all the stress and all the worries and all that. You literally, I pay my fee to the agent, they're compliant, they're regulated, they keep me updated, they do a great job. I don't want to know any more than that, you know.
I agree with you, absolutely. And again, the concern for me is, are you going to have too many ombudsmen, meaning that a tenant have got lots of places to go for compensation or redress? And will one ombudsman, once they've set a decision, will that be it? The others then can't intervene? Or will someone be able to go, you know, from ombudsman to ombudsman, from redress to redress, until they get the outcome that they want?
Yeah, it's got to be channeled. There's got to be one ombudsman, because I mean, you'll have the property ombudsman, which will cover agents and all that. Then I guess you'd have a landlord's ombudsman that would sit differently. So the thing, like, what would you do? Oh, I've got an agent that looks after me in the property I'm in, but this isn't getting done. I'm going to make a complaint about the agent. The only reason why I think a lot of complaints go not against agents, but are at agents, and they go to the ombudsman, is because of the landlord. And I think it's a good thing, because an managing agent, Julie, I'm sorry, I've told the landlord, I've made him aware of his obligation. I would like to disinstruct the landlord, but obviously we're a business and we still need the residual income to keep going. Although my integrity is saying I want to get rid of this landlord because he's not doing his, statutory right under Section 11. But then I think if the landlord is differentiating, is it the agent's fault or is it the landlord's fault? And tenants, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but tenants don't comprehend the law. And like you said, over 160 pieces, it's very hard for a tenant to understand what is the landlord's fault, what is the agent's fault. I mean, we had a tenant that emailed about a week ago. We've always keeping her up to date. In fact, a couple of times she mentioned, because I know she's got Litland, she complained about no heating on hot water. I was there within half an hour trying to fix it myself. So being really good. And this occasion, the landlord's taken a bit longer to get a repair on the shower, even though they got another bathroom. It's not like it's their only source of cleaning. And she's kicking off with us saying, oh, just because we're leaving, I don't feel we should be treated as second-rate citizens. This is unacceptable. I'm like, hang on, have you forgot everything we've done in the past? And also, we are waiting on the landlord to give us the authority to get his contractor out, which we need to, again, before we put his contractor there, he's got to have public liability and professional indemnity insurance. So we've got to do a lot of work in order to get that tenant's repair done. But she don't see that. She sees it as the agent is the problem. So in that situation, where she just complained about us to the Ombudsman, then the Ombudsman would, come back, find in our favour, and then she'd go, oh, well, now I'm going to go to the landlord. Oh, actually, it's too late. I've moved. It's got to be fit for purpose. It's got to be right. It's got to be clear, defining points.
And do you think it would be worth just listening to what you said there about the landlord dragging his feet? And, I've been there. I was a property manager for many years, been there, done it, got the T-shirt, sent the threatening email. If you do not do this, I'm taking it out of your rent. Been there, done it. Do you think that with this new ombudsman setup, there should be an opportunity for agents to have a complaint against the landlord that has instructed them? Do you think there would be a way to improve the standards in private rented if the letting agents were able to complain about the landlords that weren't doing it the way they should be? Because at the moment, the onus is on the agent to tell the landlord, you need to do this, this and this. If the landlord does it or not, it's a bit like having a 5-year-old. They'll do it or they won't.
Well, this is it.
What's the next step for the agent?
You know what? It's a really good question. That could throw a lot of things up. I mean, there's a bit of a conflict of interest because they are still the client. But on the same token, if you're disinstructing that landlord that's doing that, then you should be able to go to like a property portal, like they suggested, and say, this is the situation. I think an agent's got to have the ability to defend themselves. And you imagine we have audit logs and all sorts. So if we ever have an issue, go, actually, let's look at the audit log. And I remember I had a complaint from the landlord about 6 months ago, invited her into the office. And I said, right, before we start this meeting, what would you like to achieve out of today's meeting? And she couldn't tell me. She just wanted to rant. She didn't want an outcome other than to rant. She said she wanted compensation for something the tenant had done and felt that we were liable. And I looked at the audit log. And I'll give you one example. It was the 4th of April, I think it was, last year, or maybe, last year. And the tenant, it was a weekend, and the tenant complained about a water leak. So then we contacted the landlord to get their instruction on the 4th, it's the same day. The landlord gave the instruction on the 4th, the same day. We instructed the contractor on the 4th, the same day. The contractor contacted the tenant the 4th, the same day. The tenant said, oh, I'm not available till after the weekend, it's my birthday. And then the landlord kicked off with us and said, we should have got the contractor in. I said, well, actually, tenants got, the right of quiet enjoyment, exclusive possession. And like you say, the 5-year-olds, they're going to let us in, they're going to let us in. Turns out they didn't let us in until the following Monday, got the job done, but it caused a bit of damage. She wanted compensation. I said, well, then I suggest you pursue the tenant for your compensation claim, not the agent or the contractor. So it's about expectation management in our industry is a very difficult thing, because when people don't understand, Julie, they kick off. If I don't understand, I go, right, maybe I'm doing something wrong. And I say it with my software company. I'll ring up and I say, can I get this report? I'm probably being an idiot, so forgive me in advance. And then go, here you go, because they don't do it for you. They show you how to do it. Yeah. Here's how you do it. Posh, copy me. I'm watching your screen, job done. You learn. And it's all about getting that understanding and who does what. Because they're saying about a property portal for tenants to go to and this and that, but how many tenants, Julie, do you think read their how to rent guide? It's quite comprehensive, really. I don't think any of them do.
No, I don't think they read any of the documents they're given. I mean, I talk to tenants on a daily basis, as well as I talk to landlords and letting agents. And I don't think I've had one tenant yet since the EPCs were introduced that actually knew what it was. They know it's a pretty picture that goes on their fridge. They know when they're buying a new fridge, they've got a little rainbow on it. But when it comes to renting a property, they don't know what an E means or an F means or an A means. They just, is the property where I want it to be? Is it close to a train station? Has it got enough bedrooms? Has it got a lift? Well, all the other bits they're looking for. They're not interested in the EPC. They're not interested in the gas certificate.
Well, they will when now the fuel prices have risen. I think they'll be looking at that lot.
But will they understand what that means to them, though? Actually interpreting what an EPC means to their fuel consumption.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and it's. I mean, I've looked at a lot of energy ratings, and some landlords have been, oh God, I've got to get it to a C. And I've looked through, and when you look at the recommendations on the actual EPC for the individual properties, it could be £30 in low energy lighting throughout the whole place will get you to a C. And now they're a bit more generous with their categorizing of it. So you imagine when it first got introduced in 2007, I think it was, the EPCs,
something like that, yeah,
around that. So they were all being done then they started coming up for renewal 10 years later, but now they're a bit better, standard, you know, they're getting a bit higher. So again, EPCs, that's a whole other chat, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a lot to do with the software, though, because like with anything, when EPCs first started, the software was of the time. But obviously, the more data that's put into it, the better it becomes, and the better it can spit out the right information rather than assumptions. And I think that's why we're seeing an improvement in EPCs. I mean, I've certainly had it when all these properties had to be an E or above. We were renting out properties that were Fs. At the time, F was okay because we didn't have the legislation. But I said to landlords, before you start panicking and trying to bring this property up to an E, I said, I suggest you pay the whatever, 90 quid or whatever, go and get another EPC, then see where we are. And I would say probably 60% of them all came back with an E. It's like, there you go. That's all you had to do. Just get a new EPC.
Exactly that. Yeah, exactly that. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do we think for the white paper moving forward? Do we think this will be diluted down to a point where we'll be looking back going, what were we worried about? Or do you think all of the points that they have raised will come to fruition and be legislation?
I think we've got an interesting couple of years ahead, and me sitting in the position of property market president is a really good time, because I'm going to have a really busy year, and already I'm only 3 weeks in. I've done not much of my day job, but do you know what? If I can help contribute to a fairer private rented sector, I'm going to do it. And as you know, I've got a bit of a big mouth. I'm quite vocal on a lot of stuff, and if there's any injustice, I won't have it, and I will speak up. And I think this is what, and I said to the guys at the policy team, you know, I'm more than happy to give up any of my time to go to any of these consultations and supply this evidence. So we're putting together these little groups and that. So I'm reaching out to everybody at any point. So, you know, like you and I will chat, and you've given me some ideas, I might have given you some ideas. And it's like, it's not until you get a group of experts together, thrown all these ideas off, that you actually come up with loads of stuff that actually no one's thought of that. They didn't think of that. And we're thinking, crikey, I never thought of that. Because a few people have been saying a few things to me. I'm like, do you know what? I didn't even consider that. I didn't even consider about the pet insurance and the periodic tenancies, and the fact that if you're a letting agent, like a great big corporate agent, you renew tenancies. So basically, you renew a fixed term, it comes to an end. Your 12-month tenancy, 10 months, you're writing to the landlord, you're writing to the tenant, you're calling the landlord, you're calling the tenant. Hi, Ms. Ford, we're calling in just to say, you know, we were doing an option to renew. We're going to renew the tenancy. We'd like to do another year. Okay, all right, the landlord would like to increase rent by £25. Well, that's a bit unfair. Okay, well, I'll produce a market comparable report. Actually, you're, compared to today's market, you're 100 quid a month under the market value. Oh, okay, well, I'll come back to you. Chase. You go through the whole renewal process, which can either be done in an hour or it could be done in 2 or 3 weeks. It's time, it's admin, you're producing a legally binding contract again. It's not a case of, just photocopy it and Tipex it and write it back in. It's not that. It's very comprehensive. You've got to check the clauses off against the original clauses. You've got to make sure your tenancy agreement's updated. So you charge a fee for that, rightly so, because you're doing work. It's not like you get a bricklayer to come in and build a wall and you say, you know, I don't like that. Can you tear it down and do it again? And you can't pay for it. So there's a fee. And if you imagine these agents charge a renewal fee, that's the source of income for them that they're relying on to run their business and cover their overheads. You're going to remove that source of income as well. So what's the agent going to then do? We need to load we need that £85 renewal fee or 100 quid renewal fee, whatever that agent charges, we'll load that back onto the front end of the landlord's setup fee, and the landlord's going to go again, right, I'm either going to sell, I'm just going to up the rent again. And who suffers, Julie? Who suffers? The renter. Yeah. Renters Reform Bill, and the renter is the one that's suffering. You can't make stuff like that.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And from a legislation point of view, I mean, we've already talked about there's so many knock-on effects from this, but nobody's really been talking about deposits. And I mean, the security deposit that's taken, the 5-week deposit.
Yes.
Now, at the moment, you've got to protect that deposit within 30 days, give all the prescribed information. That then has a direct effect on the Section 21. Now, if we're removing Section 21, why do we need to protect deposits? Why do we need to provide the prescribed information? Do we have to give gas certificates now? Do we have to give all these documents that were attached to the Section 21? How does that leave the Deregulation Act of 2015? I just feel it's very unended for me. There's lots of openings that I'm just like, I don't understand where this is going. Nobody's thought of this. What happens here? Because I think deposits should be protected. I do. I think it's the right thing. But what's the consequence now if people don't? Because without Section 21, what's the worst thing that can happen?
Yeah, well, I think maybe they'll add an addendum or default the deposit regulations, so there's always that, so they're protected. But I think maybe I reckon what they'll do, because I couldn't see a mention to it unless I missed it, Julie. But with the Deregulation Act, the serving of all the paperwork, maybe they'll go over to the new notice. Maybe everything that relies on the Deregulation Act will go over to the new Section 8 if they do it. However, Deregulation Act came in to prevent retaliatory evictions, did it not? And in the white paper, it says, I'm scared to little case studies with their little comments with tenants saying, I'm scared to report maintenance in case I get served as Section 21. Well, is that not part of retaliatory eviction under the Deregulation Act of 2015?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
That legislation was purposely there. That part of it came in to help that situation. So the government now saying the Deregulation Act isn't fit for purpose because it's not prevented retaliatory evictions. In fact, it's increased them. And it makes you think, okay, so the government are coming up with the legislation and the regulation that are not working, but they're going to do some more to then not work. And then all the time they're putting all these layers in, like we've said, you end up with more landlords dropping off. Apparently there's a third less landlords than there once were. That's why rents are high, demand so high, tenants can't find somewhere. Let's re-incentivise landlords. I mean, I got some ideas which I'll probably get, blown out the water with bring back the mortgage relief for landlords. Just bring it back.
Yeah.
Just bring it back. Landlords, they start making a bit more money again, starting getting a bit more of a return. I'm all for, improving standards if it's regulated, but I want to see agents that are flouting the law. I want to see them regulated. I want to see landlords that are flouting the law. I want to see them regulated. You want a level playing field, and you see these things where an agent in wherever was fined for having an unlicensed HMO when they were renting out to 18 foreign people they didn't have the right to rent, and they're now going in and they got like 10 years imprisonment and £30,000 fine. That's good that they're doing that, but there's a lot of that that's unenforced.
Yeah.
And you think local government, like you said, they've lost a lot of funding, haven't they? Local councils. Well, when they got the bods on the street to enforce these, the fine money goes back into the local authority, but they don't have the bodies in the first place. And I use the example, trading standards with agents, regulating agents. You walk down the high street, look in the shop window, are the agents displaying EPC ratings? Are they displaying fees inclusive of VAT? Are they displaying their client money protection online within client money protection laws? There's not, right? But when you say, what are you doing about it? Well, unfortunately, we don't have the enforcement. And I'll give you another really good example, Julie, a bugbear of mine with estate and letting agents board. So you've got a corner plot, it's a bungalow, especially when it's on your road, it's even more annoying, right? And the agent puts a board on one side and then a board on the other side. So you've got two boards. That breaches the Town and Country Planning Act, right? You're not allowed to do that. Yet, if you tell the local authorities, say, look, are you aware that someone breaching this act? They'll say, well, we're a little bit busy with planning applications. It's a bit lower down on our radar, so we might send out a letter, but, where's the enforcement?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, I'm dealing with letting agents on a daily basis through a helpline that I am part of. And it's frightening to me sometimes with what I'm hearing these agents ring up asking the helpline about. And I think that there's still not an understanding of the legislation. The Tenant Fee Ban Act is just missed a lot of people. I've had someone recently ask that the landlord has agreed to take a dog only if the tenant will pay another deposit. And I'm like, well, they can't pay another deposit. But it's okay, we won't protect it. We'll just keep it in our bank account. I'm like, just no. Yeah. And they're like, well, the landlord won't take the dog then. I was like, well, then there's no dog.
Yeah.
But then if the tenant gets the dog, what's the landlord going to do? Yeah. Section 8, ground 12. Well, we know where that's going to end up, don't we?
Yeah, nowhere. Discretionary, exactly.
But it does frighten me, the amount of letting agents out there that do not have a grasp of the basics of legislation, the very basics. I had to read through somebody's AST the other day, and I think I got to point number 7, and at that point I was just like, I need gin. I can't take it anymore. It was one that was from, I think they downloaded it from somewhere in 2015, and it was now so out of date and had been tweaked and cut and pasted and other bits added in. It wasn't even a contract anymore. It was just a piece of paper with some writing on it. It wasn't balanced. It was horrendous. And when I went back to them and said, you can't give somebody this, because A, it would be worthless.
Yeah.
A judge would look at it and go, no, I'm just resorting to statute law. That's where I'm going. No. I said, but also, you're the property professional. What is this demonstrating?
Yeah.
And they're just like, oh, yeah, well, we don't want to pay a solicitor to write our contracts. I was like,
why not? Why?
Well, it costs money.
Yeah, but not as much as getting sued. And this is the trouble, isn't it? Like, with our events at Property Mart, I'm just overwhelmed with how many professionals come and they take their accreditation seriously, and they're there to learn, and the room's filled up with people like eager to learn about the law and stay for the legal update and that, and that's brilliant. And I meet members across the country, and a lot of them are very knowledgeable, smart individuals, and it warms my heart, because I think I wish the whole country was full of them. But you'll have these one-stop shops that are open that are using logos that are 20 years out of date, and it's just why would you do it? Have a bit of pride in your work.
Yeah, it's all about the get rich quick scheme, though, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, not looking at the bigger picture.
No, absolutely. David, that's our hour, I'm afraid.
Crikey, that's flown by.
I know. Brilliant. As usual, thank you so much for your time today. Hopefully we put the government in their place, put the world to rights. And if anybody's got any questions for David or I, there will be details at the end of the video. They can get in touch with us. But hopefully moving on to the next video soon.
Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.